What's the funniest thing you believed in when a child? I was terrified of removing the tag on the mattress and pillows. I thought if I ripped it off, there would be dire legal consequences. My father-in-law recently bought some new patio furniture and throw pillows. We were sitting on the deck and he said, "I sure wish I could take the tags off." I asked why he couldn't. He said the tag says it prohibited by law. I tried very hard not to laugh. He's 63. Eating seeds would grow a tree in my tummy. This is my one. An adult told me this at some point and I spent a few years genuinely afraid of being torn to shreds from the inside out by an apple tree. I thought that students in UK were learning Polish just like we learn English in Poland. That a virgin was someone that ate only meat but not eggs, milk, etc. I thought low-fat yogurt burns fat off her body, so I ate a bunch of them thinking it would give me a six-pack. I'm just imagining the disappointment when it didn't work. What did your parents do when they found out? Probably yelled at him for eating all the yogurt, and also being dumb. That if I focused enough I could lift things using the force. My mother always told me if I played with my belly button too much my butt would fall off. Still too scared to see if she's right or not. I thought that when you kissed on your wedding day, it activated some sort of biological response in the woman to start having a genetically predetermined amount of kids, since I had no idea what sex was. My mind was blown when I learned that there were unmarried people who had kids. I was so confused. I mistakenly believed that turn signals in cars turned on automatically and that the vehicle somehow understood the direction you were turning. From my position in the back seat, I was unable to watch my mum turn it on. A blanket can protect you from anything. I didn't believe in Santa Claus. The whole thing never made sense to me, but I was convinced the chupacabra was real after seeing a TV special about it. I thought actual parts of you were different ethnicities. So when someone said, "Oh, I'm part Italian," I would ask what part. I would tell people I was part Irish and point to my nose, elbows, and if I was wearing sandals, my toe. Thanks, Dad. Money was super easy to get, 'cause my parents always had money to spend for me. No PS4s or Xboxes, just little treats from the candy section. I thought money was super easy to get, and when my mom said she didn't have money I thought she was being mean to me, 'cause how can an adult have no money? Now I know. When I was about 7, my brother told me that aliens visit us and take sperm samples by taking our balls in our sleep. I slept with both hands over my nuts for about 6 months. That if I tried hard enough I could fly. When I was little I lost a tooth, and left it for the tooth fairy with a small note of, "Thanks for the $1." In the morning my tooth and the note were gone, and I formed an idea. I wrote up a very polite and nice letter asking the tooth fairy to teach me how to fly and to please include an instruction manual. The next time I lost a tooth I left the note with it. I didn't tell my parents because I was worried they'd see the note and prevent the tooth fairy from teaching me to fly. In the morning the note and tooth were gone, but there was no instruction manual or money for my tooth. I was super confused but tried to focus as hard as I could to fly, thinking maybe the TF just forgot the manual, but had given me the powers. This went on for about a week before I gave up and decided to write yet another note asking what happened and why I couldn't fly. That night as I was putting the note under my pillow, sans tooth, I noticed the gap between my bed and the wall was a little bigger than I remembered. I looked in the gap and there was my previous note, and the tooth. It had fallen down without me knowing. About a week later I told my parents about it and they decided to have the talk. Little me was heartbroken. That since outhouse didn't have a chimney, Santa Claus would obviously come down the extractor hood in the kitchen. We used to have Santa give us one present on Christmas Eve at my grandma's old house. GMA didn't have a fireplace/chimney so he'd go in through the front door. I just thought Santa had a key to her house because we were that special to have Santa. At her new house she had a fireplace so they'd always make us go to the kids' bedroom window and look in the sky for the reindeer while our great uncle went out to change, throw presents in a bag, and come in the garage door dressed as Santa. When I was like 10 I told everyone at school the real Santa visited us every year. I argued with another girl who said Santa wasn't real and said I'd get proof next year. Lamau. My sister told me I was adopted from a jungle in China, from monkeys. I sobbed/cried about this for a couple of years until my mom corrected the situation. I talked about this in my maid of honor speech for her wedding. Lol. That earthquakes were really just a big monster jumping up and down. I thought that's why we took shelter under tables, to hide. When I was 10 or 11 I was picked up from school first by my mom, and then we went to the elementary school to pick up my siblings. At some point they were learning about different cultures of the world and the hallways were decorated with those paper children in the different traditional clothes. One was a Mexican boy with a sombrero on and I remember asking my mom, "Why is the brim so big?" She looked me dead in my eyes and said, "Well, where else are they supposed to put the fish to keep them alive?" What? I called BS right away and she's telling me how they fill the brim with water and that's where they put the little fishies they catch. The teacher of my siblings always walked them out to meet us. And she was a friend of my mom, so I straight up asked her, do Mexicans wear sombreros and fill the rims with water to keep the fish they catch alive? She'd never lie, she's a teacher. And she looked at me, then looked at my mom, then my siblings, her expression never changing. And she says yes. As a 5th grader. This is life-changing information. I have something cool to tell my friends at school now. At some point we're going over North American history and culture in school. Guess who has a cool fact to share? Me. Guess who never again shared a cool fact that their mom told them? Also me. That red potatoes were special Australian potatoes. I guess we kids didn't want to eat red-skinned potatoes, so my mom told us they were from Australia. It worked because it was the 90s and the crocodile hunter was our favorite. Fast forward to 15-year-old me yelling across the produce department to ask my mom if we needed Australian potatoes. The look on her face. I thought speed signs meant that you weren't allowed to say the number on the sign out loud as long as you were on that road. When you reach puberty you change sexes. WHO put that idea in my head, but I remember being so excited thinking it's true. I ran up to my mom saying, Mom, am I really gonna be a girl growing up? She had to explain to me that no, that's not how it works, and I cried. I read that penguins carry their eggs on their feet, so that must mean they stand on their heads, holding their eggs aloft in the air, cradled by their little webbed feet. This image was seared into my brain. Years later, when I was 12, I shared this fun fact about penguins with my family. They made fun of me for years and years. Hey Pearly, did you know penguins can stand on their heads? Funny story, I believed women were just men when their peepees dropped off. I was like 6 or 7 and my mom had this dildo. I picked it up from under her bed while looking for my DS. She confiscated. I then proceeded to scream I found mommy's peepee. And showed it to my whole family. Me and my mom joke about it now, but I've never seen anyone so appalled until that point. My parents, grandparents, aunt and uncle all used to threaten us with being sent to live at Helga's house. Helga was a person everyone collectively created. She would beat children, never feed them. She had big blue bins along the wall but they were not filled with toys. We had bins full of toys, and her trailer had dents in it from throwing children against it. She was nasty. And it didn't matter where we were because, if we started acting up on a trip, Helga always had sisters and cousins living conveniently nearby. I remember my cousin and I being brats at my nanny's house. She actually picked up the phone and said she was dialing Helga. We were quickly on our knees crying and begging her not to call. I remember when I was embarrassingly older and I learned she wasn't real. I believed I was Jewish although I wasn't. It's not a big deal or funny but just random. When I was a kid I read Bible a lot. I liked the Old Testament more because of the stories. The Jewish people were the race chosen by God and so I assumed since it's the same God, I must be Jewish. I was also always told that my name was a Jewish name with a cool meaning and it matched the character in the Old Testament. So again, it seems I was Jewish. My family in fact had a lot of Old Testament names. I also went to a Jewish kindergarten where we learned Jewish traditions, so if the former evidence wasn't enough this should seal it. Apparently that was just because they were the ones with the best educational program in the city plus my mom thought I'd like it since I was so into the Old Testament. One day I elaborated the fact I was Jewish in front of my family and they explained we weren't in any way so that was a bit of a shock for me. I was around 4, and my family had this cabin that my great-grandparents built on some land. My family went there for social gathering with any friends that would come along. Anyways, at this time my cousins were well into their teens, and they were responsible for my safety and blah blah blah. On the property, there was this swing, and next to this swing was a shed which had a roof that touched the ground that was covered in moss. I guess the adults told my cousins to keep me away from the shed, so when we got over there, my cousins told me that if I touched the moss, I would turn into a dinosaur. I was freaking terrified. I believed that lie for 3 years, and finally disproved it after falling on top of some moss and bawling my eyes out until my mother told me I was being ridiculous and I wouldn't turn into a dinosaur. Up until at least age 6, I thought that terrorist and tourist were the same word when I heard them on the TV or radio. I couldn't understand why Irish tourists kept blowing shit up. This was in the UK. One time on a trip to the next bigger city my parents made some kind of joke about being tourists and later that day I asked them if we were terrorists now. In public. My dad took me to an extraterrestrial expert who convinced me I was abducted because a dream I had was too realistic so my answer is aliens. I really liked Michael Jackson. I thought she was a girl because of her colorful wardrobe, high-pitched voice, cool dance moves, and long curly hair. I was disappointed when I learned he wasn't a girl. I didn't think women pooped until embarrassingly late in life. When I was younger, I thought that if someone broke into my home to kidnap me, I could claim to have a mental illness so that the kidnapper would be too disoriented to take me. My grandma had 3 dogs and called them her babies and that turned into me thinking she birthed them. That it was illegal to turn on the interior light in the car while we were driving. I Genuinely thought there were people out there being thrown in prison for that offense. Shake my head. My husband, 35 years old at the time, yelled at me for turning on the dome light to find something at night. What if a cop sees? It was that moment I had to explain to him that his parents lied to him. He didn't believe me that it wasn't illegal until we went home and Googled it. I believed that my parents had superpowers, because when they would put me in a cart and give me a little push, they said, "Hey look, I'm pushing you with no hands." All dogs were male. All cats were female. Though people's nicknames were their actual names. When I discovered my older brother's real name, my mind blown. That when you slept your foot would disconnect and would reattach later. I always woke up with a foot that felt like radio static, but that caused me to figure out I was sleeping wrong. That all the missing persons photos at Walmart were people who disappeared from that store. Once, my mom joked that I had similar mannerisms to Steven Tyler from Aerosmith and that I could pass for his daughter. After that, I kept telling everyone Steven was my real father. I was 12 years old and was obsessed with him. I'm 25 now, still belted out to Aerosmith and still adore Steven Tyler. But I'm 99.9% sure he's not my dad. Lol. Whenever I saw a dead end sign, it meant that at the end of the road there was a pile of dead people. I believed that Asians were the product of a black person and a white person making a baby. That if I flushed the toilet while still sitting on it, my poop would somehow go back in my body and I'd have to poo again. I thought that the tip of the pee-pee looked like a nipple until like 7th grade. In my defense, all the Wattpad smut I was reading mentioned the tip, so naturally I assumed it was a specific shape. Also, condoms have a tip. My parents told me that if you wanted a baby, you could have one, and if you changed your mind, you didn't have to have one anymore. I grew up thinking that parents wished their babies into existence, and if they didn't want the baby anymore, it would disappear from the womb. When I was 11, my dad was 44. I had a full-blown sobbing panic attack because I thought my dad would always be 4x as old as me. By my logic, he would be 88 years old and probably dead by the time I graduated college. After 10 minutes of crying, I rechecked my math. That germs can tell the future. When I was like 5, I was told that germs were on everything you touch. So I thought that they would group up and be like, "You will touch the doorknob in 2 minutes. Go. Go. Go." That my toys were alive, and when I left the room, they would come to life. Safe to say, that was the last time my parents let me watch Toy Story. I was afraid to change into my school clothes in front of the TV because I thought the weatherman would be watching me. My friend is religious even as a kid. He once told me he kept taking hot showers so he'd be prepared in case he needed to shower in hell. LMFAO. Near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is a tunnel called the Squirrel Hill Tunnel. My dad said it was because there were squirrels in it. Every time we would drive through, he and my sister would pretend they were seeing squirrels. I was always so upset that I didn't see them. I was probably about 4. At 39, I still think of that every time I go trough that tunnel. Because the first live-action movie I watched as a kid was A New Hope, I thought actors actually died on camera, so they just got a bunch of old people in costumes whenever someone was supposed to die, because they were going to die anyway. Also that, when you bought a thing, you wouldn't see commercials for it anymore, so I wanted to buy everything just to not see commercials. I actually believed in Santa Claus until 10 years old, and no one, parents included, could convince me otherwise. My older cousin found a 4-leaf clover and ate it. She said she wished for my parents transform into tiny beings and that they'd end up in the outhouse. I screamed and cried as I went to see the outhouse. Lamau, for anyone wondering. No, her wish didn't come true. Lol. When I was really little, like 2 to 3, I believed that owls lived under the hood of my mom's car and pushed the car around with their feet. I realized 2 things when I was a kid. People who eat a lot are fat. People are fat when they have a baby inside of them. So I thought when someone eats a lot, a baby starts to develop inside of them. My aunt bought me a Hello Kitty plush doll and it had a little fabric lollipop sewed onto the hand. She told me if I tried to take it out of her hands, she'd cry. I believed it, and when something would get caught on the lollipop and tug on it a bit, I'd get so nervous I'd call for my mom to help Hello Kitty because I was too scared that I'd mess it up. Lol. I believed that my parents asked people they liked to be my grandparents. Not sure why. Just believed it until the day I asked why they asked my paternal grandmother to be my grandmother because I didn't like her as much and why they couldn't have picked somebody nicer.